Good evening. I am Marcia Marins, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Chautauqua County, and I'm also on the Board of Directors of the League of Women Voters of the United States. I am moderator with Judy Reynolds for this evening's Meet the Candidates Forum, sponsored by the League of Women Voters. In case you didn't know, the League of Women Voters is a trusted, nonpartisan political organization. And while we never endorse a candidate, we are directly involved in shaping the important issues to keep our community strong. The League wants everyone to vote and to be confident that their vote will count, but also wants voters to be informed. Candidates' meetings have been around for almost as long as the League of Women Voters, and hundreds of leagues have candidates' nights each year. League debates are fair and they are unbiased. They are conducted for informational purposes without a hidden agenda and controlled by the principles of nonpartisanship. They are not about the League. They are about the face-to-face exchange of ideas and discussion of issues between the community and the candidates in a fair and effective format. And we are merely the transparent facilitators of this exchange. I'm going to ask you to please turn off your cell phones. I want to hear a beep beep somewhere. Mr. Sullivan just turned his off. And it's a matter of courtesy, and I wanted to let you know that unauthorized videos are not allowed because the FCC requires that a debate must not be edited and must be broadcast in its entirety, either live or reasonably soon after it takes place. The League wants to ensure that information is not manipulated to create false or misleading impressions. So with that being said, we are happy to present our Meet the Candidates program, where candidates and interested voters meet to listen to issues and ask questions.
As you watch and listen to this debate, we have a few little hints for you. Think ahead, ask yourself which issues are most important, and even jot down what you'd like to learn. Are the candidates answering the question? Pay attention to know how the candidates answer. Are they specific, sincere, knowledgeable? Keep track of topics. Are the candidates being asked about your priority? Are the questions fair and pertinent? And afterwards, talk it out. Talk about the debate with your friends and family. Did the debate sway your decisions, and did you learn something new? Most importantly, vote on March 14th. You have the opportunity to make your voice heard and help shape the issues that affect all of us.
Well, finally, we're here. We have with us this evening the candidates for the mayor of the village of Fredonia, Mr. Michael Sullivan and Mr. Stephen Keefe. Both candidates will have 3 minutes to respond to a question they received prior to this meeting and include a brief presentation discussing their qualifications. After the opening statements, candidates will have the ability to question one another, and members of the audience will be urged to ask questions of any candidates or of all the candidates. You can also, if you're viewing this at home, you can call in to ask a question, and that number is 664-1346. Even if a question is addressed to a specific candidate, the other will be welcome to add his comments or replies. Each reply will be limited to 2 minutes. Candidates will also be able to rebut for 1 minute or challenge one another. At the end of the question period, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a few closing words delivered in reverse order from that of the opening statements. So, with that, the question is, and Mr. Sullivan will respond first, what is the most urgent problem facing the village of Fredonia today, and what is one thing you might do to help solve it if elected?
Thank you. Thanks for everyone that ventured out in the winds this evening. I myself don't often get blown around, but when I came around the corner of the Village Hall this evening, I actually felt the wind pushing me back. It takes a lot to push back 300 pounds. The answer to the question asked by the League in advance, there's an easy answer if you've been watching what I've done for the last 4 years. The biggest problem is taxes. It's not just in this village, it's in this county, it's in this state. But I don't believe that just the easy answer is the answer that you need to hear in going into this election. I think we need to address the cause of the high taxes. And I feel that the cause, the problem that has created the high taxes, is a problem of complacency or a resignation. The voters and the people have reached a point where they've expected that taxes are going to keep going up. They felt there's not an opportunity to stop the tax increase. There's not a way of saying enough is enough and putting an end to it. I've spent 4 years presenting village budgets which show a way of cutting the taxes. Granted, the village tax is the smallest of the 3 property taxes you pay, but it's still one of 3 that adds up to make us one of the highest taxed regions in the nation. Working together and looking at the budget cuts that have been presented, and had I been able to have a board of trustees that was willing to examine those cuts and adopt budgets with those cuts, we would begin the process of fixing the biggest problem. And when you fix the biggest problem, which is the high taxes, we then start to show success in other areas. Our housing market becomes more attractive because people now know that they can buy a house and their taxes will be less than the mortgage payment. We had an opportunity to attract business again. I've listened to the complacent answers so many times when I presented my budget and had the taxes then increased that, well, it's only $1 or $2 a month per household. Again, complacent. It's a lot more for an industry or a business looking to relocate here. It's a lot more for somebody looking to buy a house. And that $2 or $4 a month per household is the equivalent to one generic drug purchase at Walmart. These are big decisions. Taxes keep going up, and the people that are paying them can't afford it. And as a result, when our census comes out, we're going to see the drop in the population. People have voted with their feet. We've heard that expression, and it's true. The first time I ran for government back in the 1980s, every house had a registered voter in it. You went door to door, you went to every door because there were people living there. It's not that way today. You go out there now, there's 2 or 3 houses. House across the street from mine has been vacant since March 28th, almost a full year. I know the date because it was 3 days before the census, and I knew that the 3 people that were there weren't going to be counted in the village census. We need to defeat the complacency.
Thank you very much. Mr. Keefe.
First of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women for this forum. It certainly is appreciated. And thank you, Mr. Sullivan, Mayor Sullivan, for meeting in this agenda. And thank you, viewers, for being here, going out into the winds, and for being at home viewing us. I think my major concern is progress. Right now, I don't see Fredonia making progress. And if you're not making progress, you're not just standing still, you're falling behind. There is a recession, and we're feeling the worst parts of that recession right now. It's starting to hit home. It's knocking on our doors. And it's something that we do have to address. Now, the tax burden is huge, and it hits us from every level of government. And I'd like to use a term from Ronald Reagan, it trickles down to all of us. Some of the things that happen sometimes is that you take your tax and you shift the tax. That maybe you could lower the taxes by spending your fund balance. That's not always a good idea. I know in the past, fund balance has been used to reduce the taxes. It could hurt our bond rating. Right now, our bond rating is fairly good. If we go to bond, you want the best rating possible so you can get the best interest rate possible. So to start spending your reserves is not a good idea. You always have to be prepared for that rainy day, and we will have rainy days. The other thing that I'm concerned with is shifting the tax burden to the water and sewage thing. Anybody that just got their water bill may have noticed an increase. I noticed an increase. By shifting it to the water and sewage, you're creating a new problem. If you're taking personnel, taking them from the tax base and shift them to water and sewage, the downside of that is with your taxes, if you itemize your income taxes, you can deduct your property taxes. If Kristen Gillibrand gets her way, everyone that pays, or everyone, even whether you itemize or not itemize, you'll be able to deduct your property taxes on your income taxes. With water and sewage, there's no deduction. It's a flat-out fee. Is there any difference between a fee for the village and a tax for the village? The only difference I can really see is the ability to use it as a tax deduction. We need to be more efficient. We need to do things in a better way. We need to do things in a more, cost-effective way. One of the things I've also noticed is that on the agenda for the village board for the last few months, there's been the proposition to hire, a grant writer. It doesn't do any good to have it on the agenda. What you need to do is hire the grant writer. I've seen a few grants that have slipped through the doorway because a grant writer wasn't in place. The good thing about a grant writer is it doesn't cost, the person doesn't cost you anything unless you get the grant. It's a commission.
Thank you.
But,
Thank you very much.
Now we're going to open our meeting to a question and answer format, and we hope some good questions have come to mind. For those of you in the audience, if you wish to ask a question, there's a mic over here to my left. Please come, and we ask you not to make statements because we want to hear what the candidates have to say and what their response is. We also want to remind those of you at home to call in. Again, that number is 664-1346. The rebuttals to questions will be 1 minute. Do we have a question from the audience?
Do the candidates have any questions for each other at this point? Then we'll just
Not really.
start, and then one may just pop up. With the price, this was just phoned in, with the price of gas going up, will the candidates cut driving of trucks? People drive back and forth from lunch, from the Cushing Street barn. It's the question.
Okay.
I'm just the person that delivered it.
This is the second time, I want to go first? Okay. This is the second time we've actually had to deal with skyrocketing fuel costs during my administration. One of the things we have done is implemented some changes at our DPW barns for the distribution of gasoline to our vehicles. We are now able to monitor it better. We're able to identify each employee who has loaded fuel into a vehicle, which vehicle has been loaded and how much they're using. So we will be able to finally get a better grip on which vehicles are consuming the gas and finding ways to reduce it. We periodically get phone calls from people who are concerned they see vehicles parked and idling for long periods of time. We have addressed that with our DPW director and some of the other department heads to see if we can find a way to leave vehicles in a place where you don't have to leave them running. You can shut them down while you're doing whatever job you're working on. Unfortunately, some of our vehicles, particularly the police cars, are running an awful lot of electronics with computers in the cars today, and we've often have to leave them running for the generation of the electricity to keep those going, particularly in cold weather. But it is something the board has been following. We have been looking at. Again, we had to start dealing with it 2.5 years ago when gas prices shot up. And I think right now that you'll see over the next couple of months and going into the next budget, we'll have some much better data on what we're consuming and where it's being consumed.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Keith?
I know that one of the things I was thinking the other day, I was at the college campus and I was talking to some students there, and they have a little electronic car driving around the college campus. It's a two-seater that goes around, and I was thinking, something like that might make a nice way for the water meter driver to go around, for patrols, the people that are checking the parking meters to empty them. Something like that might have a practical aspect to it. I know as a county legislator, we pushed for hybrids. Any car that, wasn't carrying a heavy load like a truck or anything like that, we looked at hybrids. Was it cost effective? And in a lot of cases it was. One of the dilemmas that you have in the village, if you have a village worker that's sitting still eating his lunch, people say, why isn't he working? And one of the reasons they go back to the village barns is so they can eat without being noticed that they're sitting still. They do deserve the lunch break. That's part of their contract, and there is, a 15-minute break in the morning, a 15-minute break in the afternoon. These are mandates. Is it practical for them to drive all the way back to the village barns and then drive all the way back to the work site? I really don't think it is. I think that one of the things they could do is carry their coffee out to their break with them, take a little break right there on the site. And yet, what I would expect from the community is if you have a complaint about someone not working, address it to the department head, address it to the mayor, and see exactly what the whole story is. Because the workforce generally is a very solid, good workforce. We kind of force them into impractical processes sometimes because no one wants to be seen not actively involved in what they're doing when there is, time for a break.
Thank you very much. No rebut. Okay. Another question.
Whoops. Any people yet? Okay. You want to go to the mic? Yes.
Good evening. My question is directed to Mayor Sullivan, and then after you answer my question, Mr. Keefe, if you could answer my question too, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly.
What is your stance on the Chief Zoning Inspector, John Monaco, handing out citations to property owners having cookouts in their backyards?
Thank you.
Could I get some clarification?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
clarification.
I had not heard of that before. When?
Seriously? I'm coming into court in March because I've gotten a citation for having cookouts in my backyard during the summer. And I'm a property owner, and under New York state law, you can have a cookout,
Well, what's the citation for?
open burning.
Okay. If the determination has been made by our zoning officer that he feels the authority to cite for what he determines to be an open burn, the only recourse is not, again, for the board or for myself to block that. That's the reason for having a court. And you'll have an opportunity in the court to explain that this was a controlled burn or it was a grill or whatever device you had to use that. Unfortunately, we are forced in this day and age to monitor those and regulate those, not as a village law, but enforcing state laws. And there's not a lot we can do. I mean, you really have almost no open burns you can do in the village. I mean, you can't even in the village really burn tree branches and things of that nature, like you can out in the town. But even in the town nowadays, it's restricted to a very brief period of time. But again, depending on how you were cooking, you're certainly going to have that opportunity when you're in front of the judge. But he does have the obligation to go out, and if somebody has called in and identified it as an open burn, as a bonfire as opposed to a cooking event, he's got to make that citation based on state law, and then you'll have your opportunity to explain to the judge what you were doing and how it really wasn't an open burn, but it was actually a picnic and a grill. And good luck in court.
As a mayor, I would suggest you come talk to me because that doesn't quite sound right. If you're cooking with a grill in your yard, that doesn't sound like a violation to me. And I would think that you, the mayor, and John Monaco could sit down and talk about it to find out what exactly the citation's all about. I would expect, as a mayor, to handle questions like that and to address questions like that. Everyone has a concern, and there should be a place where that concern could be voiced. Should everything go through the law? Should everything go to the court? I personally don't think so. Now, I know Mike knows more about the restrictions and the regulations and everything like that, And there's going to be a little bit of time for me to get up to par as a mayor because there's a lot I need to learn. And I know Mike has 4 years' experience on something like that, and he is a lawyer. You know, he knows the ins and outs of the law. But I think that there's room in a community, in a village, for communication to solve a problem like that.
If I could,
Sure.
I just want to point out, there's a fine line, though, that you've got to be very cautious with when you step over and start to give the impression that you're putting pressure on a department head who, unfortunately, is by law required to take certain actions, and to have the idea that you're going to have a meeting and somehow you're going to fix that, and it does draw that impression that you're going to be able to fix it. Sometimes you can't, and that's why I say, unfortunately, the only alternative you really have in a case like that is to explain to the judge what you are cooking in and having it identified as a grill as opposed to an open burn, and have the opportunity using the judge to correct that. It's really a fine line, and there are days when you want to get involved in something, but you can't micromanage, or you can't supersede the authority that some of the departments have that are based on state law.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience at this point? All right, we have another phone in question to both candidates. What do each of you plan to do to reduce property tax, and what can you do if the trustees don't agree to the budget?
Who
Anybody
wants to jump in?
Sure.
Okay,
I would go ahead.
Mr. Key?
Property taxes, no one likes to pay property taxes. And one of the points that I brought out earlier, I don't like to pay water sewage increases either. I think the trustees are the ones that had the vote. You know, the mayor presents a budget to the trustees are the ones that accept it, or reject it. The trustees need to be worked with face-to-face. They need to understand that these are trying times for everyone. If there's any way to lower taxes, we need to lower taxes. You know, I'm planning on looking at every detail of the budget. I'm planning on working very close with Rick St. George to find out where exactly the budget can take a cut and how to take the cut. I was also talking about efficient ways of doing government. I was also, looking at, is there any renewable sources that we can use to lower taxes? Is there any grants out there? And with a grant, I'm not looking for a grant that's going to create a whole new spending plan on a whole new project. Is there something that we can look at that would supplement what we're doing already? And, that's something that I think we really need to look at. But the trustees need to be worked with close together, face to face, to adopt a budget that is going to lower taxes. You vote for the trustees. We all work for you, but the trustees are going to be the decision makers, and they have to be presented with something that they're going to be in favor of. I don't think anyone wants to pay higher taxes, but there is an obligation to give the services that are needed, and to give the especially security issues. Police force, fire department. Streets need to be paved. We were talking the other day on the radio about a cap on taxes. And
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Well, I may have 4 years' experience, but you've learned the major rule first, and that's the trustees have the vote. We don't.
Right.
I plan to do the same thing I've done for the last 4 years. I present budgets. I look at every department, every spending line, whether there's a need or a want, and those are the decisions that have to be made every day. I've put together 3 budgets. Each of those budgets has proposed a tax cut. Now, while I haven't been successful in getting the tax rates, I will say that we have been successful in making some reductions in the size of our village government. We have fewer employees today than we had when I took office. And if we were still at the same number, those tax increases that we did suffer through with the trustees not adopting my budget would have been much worse. We have really worked to streamline the number of employees, and that's the one area that we have to make the most inroad if we're going to control taxes. Whether it's going to be a reduction in the services we provide, whether it's going to be looking to regionalize and consolidate our services, we need to find a way to do that. The biggest problem government faces right now is every dollar you spend for an employee, you have to anticipate 2/3 of that salary for the fringe benefits between health insurance and pensions. You can't compete with the private sector. They're still looking at 1/3. That's the difference. That's the gap that has made government very expensive. We have been successful the last round of negotiations with all of our unions. We, for the first time ever, received a contribution back for a share of the health care cost. Now, it wasn't a lot, and we debated a lot whether or not to even go forward with the contract that we had negotiated or to declare an impasse. But we felt we had at least opened the door, and for the first time ever, our village employees were contributing toward the cost of their health insurance. Now, as we go forward in future negotiations, we hope to improve on that. The last thing is every year when I put out a budget, it comes with a budget statement.
Thank you.
On a
Maybe
dime.
we'll find out what that statement is at some
Someday.
point. Someday.
It's really good.
We have a call-in question, and the person that called in lives close to the carriage house, and he gets peanut dust in the air and gets the runaround from the DEC, and his wife suffers. What might the candidates do about this?
Well, I'll go first, I guess. I used to live next to or very close to the carriage house. For a long time, I was at the end of Newton Street, a couple doors from St. Joe's. And there's a combination of some things in the air, and there's also some combination of some noise issues. Unfortunately, there's not a lot that a village can do. When you get into those situations, if it's brought to our attention, we certainly can address it perhaps on a different scale than the individual calling a DEC officer. I had not heard of this as a problem with the soot from the peanuts. It's usually been an odor problem or a noise problem. But again, the DEC is the one that's able to control that, and there's not a lot that the village can do. We can't enforce, we can't adopt, we can't take any kind of an action that involves environmental issues that have already been preempted by the state. But there may be ways that, if it's brought to our attention, perhaps working with the DEC to find and make sure that they have the proper equipment in place and that they are not emitting more than is allowed by state and federal law. But unfortunately, again, that's one of those areas that really goes beyond what an elected official in a village level can do, and I certainly wouldn't want to give anybody the impression that by the office I hold, I can change those kind of things.
Thank you.
I look at that as a huge liability for the industry. Peanuts can be a severe allergen for a lot of people and can even be deadly. I would think that Carriage House would want to do something to rectify that problem. And I wouldn't mind being the mediator that would go and talk to them and say, here's the issue. What are you going to do about it? Would they do anything like Mr. Sullivan or Mayor Sullivan says? We don't have the authority, but we have the communication skills to make them aware that they do have a liability that they need to be aware of. Once they're aware of the liability, I would think that they would take proper steps to solve the problem.
Thank you.
Here's a
I do
question.
have a question, actually, that I would like you people to address. I am a resident of Chestnut Street between Risley and Madison Street. I've been a resident there for 44 years, and a portion of that block has been plagued by numerous safety issues ever since I've lived there. Number one is that there are no sidewalks on either side of the street for about half that length. There are no shoulders. The drivers go very fast because there are no cross streets, and the whole situation has been aggravated by numerous drainage ditches, one of which is, I am convinced, is 3 feet deep. And if somehow the residents of Chestnut Street found themselves in the position of having to engage in trench warfare, I think that one of those would come in very handy. And I wonder what the solution is. If you propose that the residents of Chestnut Street be forced to at least put in a sidewalk on one side of the street, or if the village would spend the resources necessary, at least to fill in the drainage ditches. I don't know if that would solve the problem, though.
Thank
And
you.
this is a problem not only in winter, where the street becomes ever narrower because of the abundance of snow that we get, but even in the good weather. I hate to see, I would hate to
The
see.
question is, you want to ask the candidates what they would do about the situation on Chestnut Street.
That's right,
Thank
but
you.
I wanted to describe fully what the dangers are.
We have been advised of the situation up there before, and I think we've talked with some of the neighbors up there in the past. In fact, I think one may be sitting at the head table here with us tonight. The first step to really accomplish anything there, and it's the same that happened on Cottage Street and a few other streets in town, is when you have the open drains, the first approach has to be a program where the residents agree to pick up the cost of the pipe, and then the drainage system is buried with the drainage pipes along the side of the road. That allows us to at least level off the shoulders and to then make an area where we could then consider sidewalks. Right now, because of the area out there and that there's no end where the sidewalks are, we're not in a position under our current ordinance to force people to put sidewalks in. In fact, the board spent several weeks this past, about 2 years ago, dealing with examining our sidewalk ordinance, and actually went in the reverse, and that if sidewalks were starting on one end of a yard and going nowhere, people are going to be allowed to take them out. What it would have to come down to, again, is not only would you be paying for the pipes to fill in the ditches, but then the sidewalk is an expense that really comes with the home ownership. We did attempt to get a grant about 1.5 years ago. Sue McKay was working very, very hard on that, but we didn't qualify because our children are bused to school and don't walk. And one of the qualifying factors would have been we'd create a sidewalk system so people could walk to school. So we didn't receive that grant. But there really is, right now, the ordinances require the homeowner to build sidewalks and to pay for the pipe. Now, the village will install the pipe, but it's still a cost to the homeowner, and that hasn't changed in years.
Thank you. Mr. Keefe?
You know, I'm going to make a comment, and I don't mean to trivialize your situation, but the one good thing that you have going for you is you keep politicians off your porch. You know, when I was going door to door, Chestnut Street was impossible. You can't walk in the street. You can't walk on the sidewalks because there are no sidewalks. And, you know, I missed your whole neighborhood, and I apologize for that. I know that when I was trustee before, you know, the ordinance was that if there was a sidewalk on each side of a area, the person in between would have to fill in a sidewalk in between. You know, people, I know there's still controversy over the Cottage Street situation. I was walking on Cottage Street yesterday, and Cottage Street is dry. It looks beautiful. It's, you know, Homes, a different story. You know, they need some work down on Homes a little bit more, and even further down, they need a little bit of work. But I think that what Mayor Sullivan was talking about, if your neighborhood got together and were willing to run the pipes, pay for the pipes, we pay for the manpower, you know, it's a win-win situation for everyone involved, and it's a long-term fix. I'm a pedestrian. I do a lot of walking, and I believe that this village should be accessible by sidewalks. And, you know, anything that we can do to encourage the sidewalks, you know, they have the 50-50 plan where you fix your sidewalk, the village pays 50% in a grant, and you pay 50%. You know, right now we're in the middle of the recession, and it's hard to, you know, predict what we'd be able to do, and everybody's, you know, screaming for a lower tax rate. But some of the plans that have been in place in the past should be reevaluated, should be relooked at, and we should be able to walk in our village without the worry of falling in, you know, deep trenches and, you know, other issues like that. But it's something that really needs to be looked at.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We had a question from two different callers. How would each of you stand if you would dissolve the village and join with the town of Pomfret to create a larger body, it says, or
Municipality.
municipality.
Mr.
Okay.
Key?
I think Mayor Sullivan and I both would be in agreement to some kind of a consolidation. I know we were talking about a coterminus the other day on the radio, where with a coterminus, what you do is you don't dissolve the town government, you don't dissolve the village government. What you do is you combine the governments to oversee both of them. You expand the boundaries for your police department, you expand the boundaries for your fire department, and maybe you give different services. You know, consolidation's a hard issue. Everybody wants to do it until it's time to do it, then certain people don't want to do it. And the problem's going to come in is if you live in the town and your taxes are going to go up because you're going to receive more services, and those are services you may not want to receive. Mayor Sullivan made a brilliant comment the other day that, you know, why do you invest money in a study if it's not going to be a go? And I would agree with that. I think what you need to do is you need to do the legwork first. You need to find out, before you start the study, before you put money into it, if people are going to support it. And I think there are ways of finding out whether people are going to support it. You need to do some advertisement. You need to do some communication. You need to talk to people. You need to get the key people involved, and you need to explore. And I know that, again, I'm going to refer back to Mayor Sullivan. He was saying that the way it's set up right now for a coterminus, you go blindly into it. You don't have a plan in mind. The government says you don't do that. What you do is you vote on it before you have a plan in mind, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And one of the things that we need to do is figure out a way to encourage the government to make a little bit more sense when it comes to these types of mergers, these types of consolidations, and in this case, maybe even a coterminus. But there are options there, and I wouldn't mind exploring them. But before we go to a vote, and before we start spending money, it would be nice to know that people are in favor of it.
When I first got involved in village government back in 1986, Carl Olson handed me an envelope. It was full of material on a 1982 coterminous town-village study that was performed. And I looked at it, and at that point, I had just been elected trustee, and I didn't have any interest in consolidating or doing anything with anybody else. I put that report in the bottom of a drawer, and it sat there for a number of years. But having been involved for a period of time now, actually it's through 4 decades, it's time. We need to pull those studies out. We need to look at those again, and we need to start making up for the lost time. Over the years, I've come around where I was one of those people that really did not want to change anything. You know, the village was fine just as the way we are. I was complacent. Not that anymore. We need to make those changes. The problem that the governors, when he was Attorney General with the statute that was adopted, is it requires that vote to take place. And we saw in Lakewood it failed. And for Fredonia, because of the voter registration, including the students on campus, our 10% is almost 550 signatures needed to get that on the ballot. And it's pretty tough to get 550 signatures and then try to convince people to vote for something when you don't have a plan. What I would suggest is, and I've been over to the town a couple of times and talked with Don Steger and talked with their board about getting the meeting going to figure out what services we're providing, how we can provide them as one, and lay out a plan, and then get the signatures, and then let the vote take place. Now, it doesn't have to be an expensive study, but it can certainly be a list of the services that we would envision the unified unit of government providing, so that the voters could then go in and say, yeah, I can see how that'll work, and it's not going to upset me to have that change. I'm not going to lose some service that I think I need. We could do it, but it requires that footwork.
Thank you. This question was a phone-in question for Mayor Sullivan. The infrastructure is old. How can you cut services when you may need extensive repairs and or replacements?
Okay. Well, we in our capital budget every year do put money in for repairing things that are in the infrastructure. We have been very cautious in spending money for one of the most expensive infrastructures right now, and that's our reservoir. We are looking at a tremendous dollar amount that we would have to spend, which would actually increase just the debt service alone for the project of increasing our spillway, almost $200,000 a year on the water fund, which right now is a $1.4 million budget. So $200,000 added on is quite a large increase. The county and the state have both been very cooperative in holding off while we continue to work not only with the town on the North Pomfret Water District, but with Chadwick Bay on trying to create a regional water district where we could ultimately decommission Brockton's water treatment plant, use Fredonia's and use Dunkirk's, and interconnect with additional interconnect locations, and share the cost then of the needed improvements with a base of 30,000 water users rather than our 3,500 in the village. By sharing that over a larger base, it becomes a much more economically feasible project. We have some extensive, if you followed the, outside of the water, if you followed the discussion on the comprehensive plan, there's a whole chapter in there of various projects that need to be considered. But again, it's a matter of weighing the need versus the want. Which ones do we really need? Which ones don't we need? And we will continue in the future working with that problem every day. And there are going to have to be decisions made to not provide certain infrastructure replacements. And when the project or the equipment or the facility is no longer operational, they maybe have to be decommissioned and no longer used. We can't necessarily keep using all of the infrastructure we've used in the past.
Thank you. Mr. Keefe.
A wild guess would be that comment came from Forbes Avenue, or Holmes Place, I'm sorry, Holmes Place. Walking down Holmes Place, you can see that the street's been broken open a number of times, that the pavement's in rough shape. The water is standing on both sides of the street. You know, right now is a rough season because it's starting to melt and everything like that. But when I talked to one of the residents there, I said, so you would like probably to have your street paved, right? And he says, no, don't pave that street until you fix the problem. We have water main breaks on a regular basis. Now, one of the things, I know that, public employees are criticized in high levels right now, but can you imagine being one of these street workers going out 3 o'clock in the morning, freezing cold, sub-zero temperatures, fixing a water main break that you may be working on 12, 15, 20 hours in the freezing cold? I respect them. I respect what they do. I mean, if it comes to negotiations, we're going to negotiate very hard because we're in an economic crisis. But I do respect what they do. But I know that Holmes Place has a major problem. They have a major concern, and they deserve to have it rectified. I would take Jack Bolin down there, and I'd say, Jack, what are we going to do? How are we going to solve this problem? And look at the budget and see what we can do. But it needs to be rectified.
Thank you. What's next question I have here? Oh, somebody from the audience? Yep.
Yeah, I have a question about why we need 3 building inspectors in Fredonia when a lot of the time they're spending is doing inspections that aren't mandated by state law. I read an article in the Observer, it was last week or the week before, and John Monaco is wanting to do all of these multiple family dwelling inspections that the New York State officials say are not mandated by New York law, and Sam Dreo is backing them up, but they're 2 New York State officials.
Your question was?
Why do we need 3 building inspectors?
Thank you very much. Well, I guess it's directed to you
My turn?
first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right now, we have 2. In the last budget, we did reduce one. And when I ran 4 years ago, one of the things I wanted to do was to eliminate the inspections that are not state required. We are close today to doing that. At the last board meeting we had, we were given a report that shows which inspections or which types of inspections have been added by the village board over the years. And the plan is to now have the local ordinance drawn to eliminate anything that's not required by the state. One of the things, if you've been following that over the last 2 months or so, has been trying to get a definition of what a multiple dwelling is and what part we have to go into. As it turns out, what we need to do is the common areas in a multiple dwelling. We don't need to go into an apartment. It's always been my concern, how do we hold a landlord accountable for what a battery may have been taken out of a smoke detector, the extension cords that some tenant has brought in. they really can't control that on a regular basis, and they're at risk for whenever that inspection is done by what a tenant may do in their house. And then I get others that will say, well, you want to have those inspections so we can guarantee a safe, we aren't guaranteeing any safe housing. You go through and the extension cords are gone, the smoke detector batteries are in. The first time there's something cooked on that stove, the battery's out. The first time they need to plug a new television in, there's an extension cord, and before you know it, we're back to where we were. That inspection is only that moment, and that certificate hanging there giving somebody the idea that that house is safer than any others. It's a false sense of security. It always worries me that we're doing that, and it is one of those things that we are in the process of getting fixed. It's one of those things that I think you'll see a draft of a local law probably within the next 2 board meetings for a public hearing. One of the other parts of that is the duplexes. When we have an individual, I wish there was like a yellow light telling us we're getting close or something.
Yeah, yeah.
This,
Mr. Keefe.
this is something that I live with also. I have 2 apartments in my house upstairs. I live in the downstairs apartment, so there's 3 apartments in our house, and we get inspected on a regular basis. It really, it doesn't bother me that much that we do get inspected. I know they pick up on things that maybe I wouldn't think of, but each time they come in, there's something new, a new ordinance that needs to be followed. Carbon monoxide detectors, I think, was the last one. Your fire extinguisher, you buy it, and then when they come again, they say, well, it has to be renewed or you need to buy a new one. And I don't think there's anybody that goes around and does accreditation on your fire extinguisher, so it's cheaper to buy a new one. There are some issues there. I would like to say that I know the answer to the whole situation, and I don't know the answer to the whole situation. I know it's one of those things that I would have to look into very closely and very quickly. The false security that Mayor Sullivan's talking about, I could see the village being used as a secondary insurer in a lawsuit, that you said that this place was safe, it burned, somebody was injured. You've got the deep pockets, we're going to sue you along with the landlord. There are a lot of things that need to be looked at with something like this, and that's one of the things that I would like to really do, is look at it and make sure that we're not increasing our liability through these inspections, and that the inspections are legal, mandated, and practical.
Thank you. What specific things could be done to attract businesses to Fredonia beyond cutting taxes or keeping them from increasing? We'll start with Mr. Keefe, since.
One of the things that I think would make a major difference is to work a little bit closer with the college. You have, a number of young people that live right in this community, and yet except for the bars maybe, the downtown isn't really geared toward the younger generation. You got the coffee shops and things like that, but I would think that there's a good marketplace. We have a beautiful downtown area. I think it's a very nice place to do business. Is taxes the thing that drive people away? I don't think taxes are the only thing that are an issue. I think the appearance of the village needs to be maintained. When I was a village trustee, I was very proud that every storefront was full. Every business was operating. One of the things that I would do as mayor is I would have an organization of the business leaders to meet on a regular basis, talk about what their issues are, and try to promote new businesses to come into the area. There's so many things that take away from the entrepreneurship in our society, and it's not a village-based thing. It's a national problem. People are afraid to lose health insurance by going into their own business. One of the things that maybe we could do is look at a community-wide health insurance program where somebody with a small business could buy into that program and get a group rate, at something more affordable. There's a number of things we can do, but I think we're missing the boat. Every college town I go to, you have the college people involved in the local businesses. Berea, Kentucky, out in the mountains of the Appalachian Mountains, they've got this community built around the arts of the college. And it's a beautiful little community with a lot of activities in the downtown. And I'm getting ready to get the red light, aren't I? Okay, go ahead.
but not yet.
Oh, can I
no,
keep going?
The hand was on there, he knew it. Saved the noise.
I saw her hand.
I don't know how I answer that question, because they excluded the one thing that I would want to talk about, and that is cutting taxes. That's what government can do. We can't create jobs, we can't create businesses, we can't, but we can create an environment that allows for the private sector to come here, to locate here, for the executives making the decision to look at this area and say, yeah, I do want to go there. Because not only the industry is going to be paying taxes, but those executives making those decisions relocating here are going to be paying taxes. So I think we have to. Now, if there's somebody out there that has a way that would, or suggestion, and we've had a couple of people talk about different ideas, and in fact, one resident has started a business, at least for the students, to try to get them online to find local businesses. That's probably one of the best things. I think it's Save Jack. It's one of those things that we can't compete as a business community unless we find a way to tap into the internet sales and work that the students are doing. They don't come downtown to frequent shops and businesses because they're buying their things online. And we need to find a way to have that availability. You know, that's not a government job, but I certainly would be glad to help push along people like Brett, who's come up with his idea, and to get those going, because that's how the students are finding the businesses. This next census is going to show that half our population is college student age. There's no doubt in my mind. There's 5,600 college students here, 2,600 are living right on campus. And if we're around 10,500, 10,900 people like we were 10 years ago, it's going to be because of the college students. But they really don't come downtown. They don't come down during the day. They have so many opportunities and options on campus for lunch. Faculty and staff don't come out as much as they used to. Those are the things that we've lost, and there sort of is a wall between the campus and here.
Thank you. You know, we should have a little sign here with the phone number for our viewers at home. I realize that it's probably not across the screen, so we'll repeat it again.
Yes, 664-1346. You're doing a great job calling in.
They are.
Okay.
At least Santa gets the number across the screen when he's on.
Yeah, well, it's a better crew, I guess, or something. I don't know.
All right, for both candidates, if Fredonia has to cut services in order to avoid a deficit, where would you look to cut, or what would you refuse to cut?
Well, go for it.
Unfortunately, the only way to make a sizable cut in a budget is personnel. And Mayor Sullivan said it a while ago. I mean, we're a bare bones streets department. We're a bare bones police department. There have been a number of cuts already. I mean, I think that when I was a trustee, there were probably 20 street department workers. I think you're down to 11 now. You know, when you look at 11 people that work year-round, I mean, right now, they're moving snow. Well, right now, they're paving streets already. I saw them out, you know, paving up the potholes. Next, what they're going to be doing is paving streets. They're going to be moving, you know, mowing grass, moving leaves. Year-round, they're working, and some of them might even take a vacation, but I doubt it. You know, it's a never-ending job. So I think the streets department at this point, I don't see how you could touch the streets department. You've streamlined the water, the reservoir system by reducing one person, automating. So that's another one that's hard to touch. The wastewater treatment, I think they're down to a pretty low level of employees. Where do you cut? Good question. What services do you want to lose? And I think that that's one of the things that needs to be a community question. If you want your streets and sidewalks plowed, you want your street workers. If you want your water mains fixed, you want your street workers. If you want somebody to walk up to a car that's driving erratically at night, tap on the glass and say, "What are you up to?" you need your police department. If you want, you know, somebody that's willing to go into a burning house or a burning car and save somebody's life, you want your fire department. If you want clean water to drink, you want your water treatment plant. And if you want that water to be clean when it goes into Lake Erie, you want your wastewater treatment people.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, I've worked for 4 years, and I've had and recommended cuts in every department. Some of those cuts, even though the taxes have gone up, have still been made. We're one less employee in Village Hall. We will be, from when I took office, I believe, in the next budget I proposed 5 employees down in the Department of Public Works. Before I took office, we were down 1 in the water. We'll be down 1 in the wastewater treatment plant. We have had sizable cuts in our employment in this village, and even with those cuts, the costs keep going up. Again, it goes back to the 2/3 for fringe benefits, and those are things we have to work with when we go into negotiations. Unfortunately, I think the day is coming quick when we cannot sustain a village, we cannot sustain a small town, we cannot sustain a small city. The only way we're going to be able to do it is by a regional approach. It's going to happen. I've spent a good part of my time in the last 4 years working with the Chadwick Bay Group to create the regional water. I believe that's going to be a system that will show the public how we can bring about savings by consolidation, how we'll be able to bring about savings by doing it as a regional body rather than each of us trying to be an island of ourselves, trying to struggle with how much we can take in tax money from our residents. We have been doing that for 50 or 60 years, and it's not working anymore, folks. We got to change it, and I want to work for another 4 years to keep pursuing getting that water district done, working with Chadwick Bay, and then start to look at each and every one of the services we provide, whether it's fire service, whether it's police service. We're paying a lot of money. We pay $226,000 from village residents for sheriff's road patrols. We got to find a way to do it as, God, I hate that light.
You can finish the sentence instead of, just finish, as long as it's sentences in a paragraph.
There's something about that click.
I know.
It's like,
Everybody
stop.
knows.
It's
Everybody knows.
intimidating.
We're just about reaching the end, but, so I'm going to, we had several phone-in questions, but I'm just going to ask the last one. Thank you. And the question is, why do we have to have 25-cent parking meters when Dunkirk has 10 cents and Westfield has no meters? It hurts business. Go for it.
And I know one of the things I just looked into recently is where the parking meter money goes into. And then the parking meter money goes into paying a personnel that normally would have to be paid out of the tax dollars. And so that, the 25 cents, and it's really kind of inconvenient when you pull up to a parking meter and you realize you don't have a quarter in your pocket. You search your car and you don't have a quarter anywhere. And then you drive away and you think, where am I going to park?
You need a purse. There's always one.
It's a man bag.
Sorry,
But,
I shouldn't have done that.
You know,
I'm sorry.
the one good thing that we do have going for us is we do have, some municipal parking lots. And we have, and we do have a third lot on Water Street that I could see opened up for a little bit more of additional parking. So that you don't normally, or you don't necessarily have to use a parking meter. You do have options here. For the convenience, you do have the parking meters, you do have handicapped accessibility parking, you do have some other options there. 10 cents, is it worth putting a person to check the meters out for 10 cents on the meters? I know that one of the things that I get told by the business owners is if there's not a parking meter, people park there and walk away, and then people that want to shop can't park. Whereas with a parking meter, you do have a way to monitor it somewhat. Yeah, I think we do have some other options rather than paid parking. I think that the parking meters serve a purpose. It's something that I would research, but at this time right now, I don't think that the 25 cents, for a parking meter is something that's going to, break the bank. But I can see somebody's point when they're trying to park and they don't have a quarter in their pocket and they don't carry a purse.
I have advocated eliminating the parking meters since the 1990s. They are an added tax on business. I had a small retail store for a number of years, for 5 years on East Main Street, And for somebody to come in and buy a newspaper, a magazine, and a pack of cigarettes and know they had to put 25 cents in a meter, when they could go to 60 and 20 and pull into a store there and not have to pay anything for parking, definitely had an impact on my business. This now is the digital age, and my proposal has been, and I'm still working on getting the approval of it, would be to use digital cameras. We also have a police car that has a device on it that drives by and can scan in the license of the vehicles it's passing. We certainly could eliminate the meters, make the pass-through at 9 o'clock in the morning, and at 11:30, if those same cars are there, ticket them. Keep it the 2 hours, but not take the 25 cents. Now, everybody will tell me, well, that's a revenue you're going to lose. Okay, it's a tax. It's cutting something that's costing people money. I have no problem finding a way to make it without that revenue, or make sure that the parking tickets now are substantial enough that if you get caught under the digital camera, you're going to pay more than a $6 ticket. Those are the things that, getting rid of the meter, and if it becomes a revenue issue, then we've got to increase the dollar amount for the violations. We need to keep the Main Street moving. We've got to have our businesses with the ability to bring customers in. And again, the whole reason for the meters in the first place wasn't a revenue thing when they first went in years ago. It was to time people and keep the cars moving so new customers could get in. Unfortunately, over the years, it's become a revenue source, and it becomes protected because we don't want to give those dollars up.
Thank you.
We're going to now allow a minute for a concluding statement from each of the candidates in reverse order. So we will begin with Mr. Keith.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. And again, thank you to the League of Women Voters for inviting us here tonight. I feel that Fredonia is a great place to live. I've raised my family here. I love the idea that we're in a town that the largest employer is the university. I like the idea that we do have young people here. We have fresh ideas. We have, and I've gone over to the college a few times recently, and that's one thing that the college students keep saying is you're reaching out to us, and we like that. I think my attitude as a leader, as a mayor, is that I am easy to communicate with. I don't mind communicating. I don't mind meeting with people. I don't necessarily have to say no to every issue. I don't have to say, no, I won't talk to, John Monaco over an issue. No, I won't talk to, the Red Wing over an issue. I think that what we need to do is be able to communicate back and forth. I think that as a mayor, I can work with the trustees face to face to make sure that the village needs are addressed.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everyone for being here, coming out on this windy night, those of you that have watched on TV, as well as the League for sponsoring this. It is a great opportunity to hear the candidates. Obviously, you've heard a lot of agreement this evening, and that happens. There are a couple of fine points. I think one of the things you heard tonight, difference of opinion on taxes or water and sewer rate charges, and I do want to go back to that. I have made sure that the costs of our village employees are shared equally amongst the various departments and parts of your budget, including the water and sewer. And I believe it's important to do that. When I was in government the first time, we were taking tax money to keep our water filtration plant running. That meant taxpayers, not the users, were paying. And we have a lot of people who use our water that don't pay taxes. We have a lot of not-for-profits. We have a lot of tax-exempt property. By keeping the costs shared equally between water, sewer, and the taxes, it makes it so that everybody is contributing. Otherwise, if we didn't have it shifted to the water and sewer, we'd be upping taxes even higher, and that's not acceptable.
Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, and thank all of you for attending. And thank you, Mindere Amaran, our voter service chairperson, who always does a fantastic job in producing this. And thank you, timekeeper Janet Jankowski-George.
So, participate in your government and let your voice be heard by joining the League of Women Voters and exercising your vote on March 14th. The polls will be open from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. And I'm sure this debate has been videotaped and will be rebroadcast on Channel 5. So check it out when you get a chance if you want to review some of the great answers our candidates have had. So thank you all for coming out, and we'll see you at the polls. Bye.